Attorney Nathaniel Lee, a lawyer with credibility, success, and experience. Representing people in hundreds of jury trials, Nathaniel Lee is who you want by your side in the courtroom. You've seen the rest, now hire the best. Contact Lee, Cosell, and Feigley today. And now, to address the legal concerns of the community, Praise AM 1310, 95.1 FM presents Legally Speaking. Here are his hosts.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us again today. I have my superstar panel, Attorney Primes and Attorney Banks. And we start off, of course, hoping that you have a safe Thanksgiving. We should have a record amount of travel this Thanksgiving, and make sure you drive safely. Give yourself plenty of time. And today I ran into some of that traffic coming to the office, and there's a lot of really bad drivers out there. So you have to be especially vigilant to make sure you look out for people not paying attention. On the holidays, people got a lot going on, and sometimes they drift into your lane and could cause a terrible accident. So make sure that you be safe. And when you start your journey, make sure you give yourself plenty of time and do it at a safe hour. Now, having said that, one other thing that bothered me, on September 25th, the Attorney General in Indiana, Todd Rokita, sent a notice out to all the law firms that he would block any state contract for law firms that use DEI practices. It's outright assault. Now, by the way, in terms of African-American lawyers that does business with the state, I don't think it's 1%. I only know one Black lawyer in the state of Indiana that does a little part-time contract. So I guess he's going to try to make it zero, I guess. But for all those people out there that are voting, this adverse affect the community because they're saying that you shouldn't get state contracts if you're a minority, I guess. But having said that, counsel, we had some crazy things occurring. There's so many legal things just around the administration until it's impossible to track. But start off, maybe Marlene could explain this. The Jim Comey case is a strange paradox. Jim Comey, as you know, was a former FBI director. He's a Republican, and he became infamous or famous during the presidential election between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. He is the one that when Hillary Clinton was leading in the poll by about double digit, he announced shortly before the election that he was investigating her for a potential criminal act for document improper use of those documents on a private server. And that changed the trajectory of the entire presidential race at that time. She went from about 11 up to 2 down in 48 hours. I was getting those polls. It was just shocking. Trump had got hit with the Planet Hollywood story of him grabbing women by private parts. And so he was sinking in the poll, but Jim Comey gave him a lifeline. And then he waited until about 10% of the vote was already in. And then he said, we're not going to indict her. So that was the single most significant thing that happened during the Clinton-Trump presidential election. It led to Trump leading the wave, and the mantra became lock her up, and then he wrote that to victory. So now Trump apparently fell out with him and directed someone to indict him. And then it get a little bit crazy. Maybe Marlon can explain it.
Yes, good morning, everyone. It is really a challenging time at our largest law firm, the United States Department of Justice. This is a really important entity. It protects all of us. It's not, just for, one president. The whole job of the Department of Justice that I was told in my training was it was important to do justice, that you can strike hard blows, but you can't strike foul ones. So what your audience should recognize is that there's a number of problems in terms of the Comey and Letitia James indictment. The first issue is that you have a president of the United States basically, tweeting out or using his Truth Social platform to say, hey, there are certain people that I believe should be indicted and they are guilty. And that's clearly inappropriate. There should be a wall between the White House and the Department of Justice, and those reforms are put in place. A lot of them following Watergate and all the revelations in terms of President Nixon sicking apparatus of government on his enemies and having an enemies list. So that's the first problem. And so as a consequence, the defense teams for Letitia James and James Comey have filed various motions regarding selective prosecution and vindictive prosecution. And those cases almost never win. But the challenge for the Department of Justice is going to be the president has given the defense team a great argument in that, hey, they have a message from the president in real time to the attorney general that they should be indicted, they should be prosecuted and found guilty. So that's a problem. The other issue is, the audience stay with me, is that the U.S. attorney was appointed by President Trump. Okay, this is somebody that went through whatever vetting process he had and said, hey, this is a person I want to lead the Eastern District of Virginia, which is right outside of Washington, D.C. And this is a really important U.S. Attorney's Office because it houses, the CIA. So they do a lot of national security cases, a lot of high profile cases there. So part of the process as it relates to U.S. Attorney's Office is that before there's an indictment, you have to work with the FBI agent and determine if there's sufficient evidence to move forward with impaneling a grand jury and asking them to indict. So what happened was they followed this normal protocol, and there was a declination memo basically saying from this attorney that President Trump appointed. He says, hey, there's not enough evidence to indict James Comey. So this U.S. attorney finds out through the grapevine he's going to be fired, so he goes ahead and resigns. And then the president appoints someone in an interim role, the current occupant, and says, hey, I want you to fulfill this role. Meanwhile, there's only a few days left before the statute of limitations expires. And what that basically means is that you have a certain time period to bring charges, and those charges were going to expire, and therefore they could never be brought against James Comey again. So given the declination memo of the prior U.S. attorney, nobody on staff at the entire U.S. Attorney's Office or the Eastern District of Virginia would process this indictment. And so, the current, occupant basically did so on her own, and she's never been a criminal lawyer. Her prior background was an insurance lawyer. And so she tries to do all this herself, which is really problematic. So then the next error that took place is that she impanels a grand jury and she makes a fatal error. And this is just a humongous error that any first-year assistant U.S. attorney would know. Your audience should be familiar with, the Fourth Amendment. Basically what happened is that they were attempting to indict James Comey for alleged false statements he made. So James Comey has an attorney, and there was a search of that attorney's materials. And so there was an allegation. This was attorney-client privilege materials. So you can't reference those materials when you're talking with the grand jury to see if they'll indict. Well, what did they do? This U.S. attorney that the president appointed that had no experience, they reference the fact that they and rely upon documents that James Comey's attorney had. And so what's supposed to happen is there's supposed to be a separate team of attorneys that look at these items, and they don't communicate with the other team that may be involved in the prosecution decisions. So they cross that line. And then if that isn't bad enough, there's a violation of the right of self-incrimination, which is enshrined in our Constitution. The grand jury asked Hooligan, who's the person that the president appointed, well, hey, I have a question. And she makes a fatal error of saying, well, hey, James Comey will clear that up. You can't say that because it gives people the impression that he has to testify. So that's another problem. So that's a really huge problem because, it looks as though the grand jury panel relied improperly on false statements that the U.S. attorney, relayed. And then if that doesn't make it worse, then you have the final group of errors. The jury, the grand jury panel, they get this false information and they're presented with three counts, all right? And the grand jury panel basically says, hey, we disagree with count one, but we agree with counts two and three, all right? So instead of bringing the grand jury back and saying, okay, well, you took out one, I'm going to give you a new indictment with just two and three on it. What this U.S. attorney did is she basically whited out, charge number one, and then signed it and had the foreperson sign it and then presented it to the grand jury. So the full grand jury never got to look at the final draft. Now, all it would have taken her is an extra 15, 20 minutes maybe, or even a day to call back the grand jury and say, hey, counts two and three, you agree to sign it. Now, there would still be the prior problems that we talked about in terms of constitutional violations, but the fact that the grand jury did not review the final document that basically initiates a criminal process is really problematic. Now, a final point I'm going to make, and we'll just kind of connect those 2 points where you talked about DEI, and I think this is really important that we have to frame these issues. The people that are talking about DEI, they don't really talk about the reason why we need them. We need them because people that have these close connections get jobs they're not necessarily qualified for. And that's why you had a whole generation of African Americans in the 50s and 60s before affirmative action that didn't have any opportunities. You had people with law degrees, medical degrees. They were working at the postal service. It's a great job, don't get me wrong, but there was no opportunity available for them. All right. And so meanwhile, juxtapose this whole DEI with the fact that you have the Health and Human Services Secretary has no medical degree. The Department of Education secretary is not a PhD, has never taught anyway. She worked in WWF. And handle that. And then you have the U.S. attorney on a very high profile, important case, has never prosecuted a case. So we really have to connect the dots and really hold, this team accountable. But a lot of us that are alumni of the Department of Justice, and you can see my logo in the back from my days at the U.S. Attorney's Office, we're just really appalled. The Department of Justice was never perfect, as no institution, but there are certain norms that have to be adhered to. And if those norms aren't adhered to, it's a danger to everyone. Now, even though, Mr. Comey has some problems that you described earlier, we're all subject to the Constitution. And if we violate the Constitution regarding one person, what's to say they won't violate it when they deal with you, me, or somebody else?
Yes. Attorney Banks, were you troubled by following this story?
Oh, absolutely. And thank you, Attorney Primes, for your excellent overview and summary of all the egregious errors, several of which, and most of which, if not all of which, constitute grounds to dismiss this case. Of course, based on vindictive selective prosecution as declared, by the president himself. It's clear, or at least we have, it's been discovered this week that the full grand jury never reviewed the complete Comey indictment, and that the DOJ overrode a declination memo, as Marlon stated, by career and Trump political appointed attorneys. It's also clear that this attorney is not qualified to be in this position, that she's a sycophant, she's incompetent. And I'm wondering whether or not this latest action should result in disciplinary and ethical charges uh, filed against her. I think she should very well be subject to state disciplinary action. And back to the issue of DEI and diversity and inclusion, affirmative action, diversity and inclusion, those principles have never been articulated to or intended for unqualified individuals to obtain access to federal contracts or corporate positions or other opportunities. It was for individuals who were qualified and are qualified that didn't have access to those types of opportunities because of inherent discrimination. And so it's also true, and I think we have to push back in uh, the very full-throated around in this global economy. The statistics clearly show that diverse business teams achieve more profitable business results than homogeneous teams. It's just a fact, and the statistics very clearly show this. Back to the Comey indictment, from my perspective, there are several grounds based on the facts, the law, and the process that should result in this case and the Letitia James case being dismissed.
Well, okay. Imhotep, you got a question or comment for us today, sir?
Yes, good morning. Good morning to everyone listening, everybody on YouTube. Thank you for taking my call. Wish a happy, wish a peaceful and thankful holy holiday season for everyone. We're in trying times. Couple things. I know you guys dealing with Comey. I just want to throw this out there, and I'll listen, see if you all pick it up. The Indiana denial of redistricting, and then the swatting of all these legislators. What do you all think, or how do you think that this information is getting to subordinates of the MAGA movement to be able to go swat these people personally? I know it was a vote, Nate, I think 29-19, so I know they're probably on record. But there's got to be somebody handling this from a larger standpoint to target these people. And from what I've studied, and from my mother, we looked up, her being an attorney, the Indiana Constitution does say that you can't, it explicitly details where you can't do redistricting. Redistricting is only allowed every 10 years. It's in the Indiana Constitution. So I think those people know that. That was probably leading to it, along with probably making areas purple, and why they did not want to do it. Then Brian comes out and say he was swatted. I don't believe anything Brian says. So I like your opinion of this pressure we got going on here. And then number two, I just read this morning from the New York Times that the Supreme Court just did it again. They stabbed us in the back. They stayed a lower court ruling overturning the Texas districts, and they're going to allow that new map to stand during the appeal. Why would they do that? Why wouldn't they let the lower court ruling striking it down stand, and then have Texas prove that they're not disenfranchising black people? Got a lot of relatives in Texas. I'm on them all the time about being involved, making sure they're voting, getting out, being active. Young people, some of my younger cousins, college students, making sure they're active. But we're talking about a large swath of people, black people, brown people in the state that would be taxed without representation. And that has to be, that's totally preposterous. Why would the Supreme Court at least let the lower court ruling stand for the appeal instead of letting that map take effect? That is very detrimental. And I'll listen to your answers off the air. Thank you.
Yes, I'm concerned about the whole issue of swatting, and just for your audience, it's can happen where someone finds out someone's address that they do not like, and then they call emergency services, and a whole bunch of police show up at your house, or they make a whole bunch of orders of pizza that you didn't order. And it's certainly a scary phenomenon because, a lot of times these individuals are public servants. They're just doing their job. And, the swatting basically is just to instill terror that, hey, we know where you're at. And you couple that with the fact that, we've had federal judges that have been harmed. And there was a notorious incident where a judge was shot. So, these things should be taken very, very seriously. They're not funny. They're improper use of resources. Now, as it relates to the Texas case, this is really troubling because, you had a three-judge panel in Texas, and they basically, looked at the evidence, they heard evidence, and they basically indicated that, what had happened in terms of the redistricting in Texas was improper because there was a letter from, the Department of Justice. There was a letter from the governor, and those letters, according to press reports, sort of suggested that, this was just a naked attempt to disenfranchise African American voters and their elected representatives. And so the panel correctly decided, at least in my view, that this was problematic and that we're going to go back to the old district. And I think your caller is absolutely right that districting is done every 10 years. And what has been done in this case is they've thrown out that practice and said, hey, because I think that I could potentially lose, at least that appears to be the mindset of the current administration, that we're going to change the rules and redistrict during the middle of the decade so that we can get some tactical advantage. So it's really inappropriate. And I'll leave you with this. I believe it was Barack Obama or another politician that indicated that, hey, you don't get a chance to select your voters, all right? And this is what is actually being done in terms of these redistricting efforts. You have to appeal to the voters as they are, and this is an inappropriate attempt in my view, and violates that fundamental principle. And also, it could result in disenfranchising a number of African Americans across the country, because press reports and various calculations are that, hey, if we're not careful, and if the Voting Rights Act case that is currently before the Supreme Court, doesn't turn out in a favorable way, and then looking at what's happening in Texas, you could lose half of the Congressional Black Caucus, and certainly they won't have the diversity of the president that Attorney Banks had mentioned previously as being a benefit.
Okay. Attorney Banks? Well,
going back to 2019, there was a case called Rocha versus Common Cause, and it was a 5-4 decision, just to add some additional context, in which the court held that partisan gerrymandering is a political question beyond the jurisdiction of the federal courts. And again, with the exception of racial gerrymandering. And in that 5-4 decision, Elena Kagan read her dissent into the record, because that's how strongly she was against the court's majority opinion. And so this week, we saw the Texas court rule that in a case filed on behalf of 13 Black 3-judge panel ruled that these voters were discriminated by the Texas withdrawing of the maps, which were ordered by the administration and the RNC, and that the Texas redistricting map is an unconstitutional racial gerrymandering. And so, of course, the case was appealed, and conservative Justice Alito, who manages appeals from the Fifth Circuit, issued an order, as Attorney Prime stated, pausing the order and has ordered briefing on the issue by this upcoming Monday. And so I agree again with the with our caller's opinion. Now, the argument that's being made is that the lower court's opinion will cause chaos in the upcoming election. The campaigning has already begun, that candidates have already gathered signatures, and that the primary is only 93 days away. And so that's the basis for the argument that the newly racially discriminatory map should be allowed to stay in place at this juncture. So we'll see what happens.
Well, my problem with this so-called redrawing of the map, from a common sense standpoint, we have population shifts in our country every day. We've had a large amount of Hispanic folks flee America. We've had a lot of Canadians leave America. But the point is that we face the representation in the House of Representatives based upon a pro rata equal disbursement of citizens. So you take the 435 congressional office, you divide it by the population, and which is probably about 330, 340 million, and then you get a statistical average of the number of folks that should be in each congressional district. So if it's impossible today, based upon this unprecedented usurpation of power by ICE, by taking citizens, some Americans, some foreigners, and locking them up and deporting people, the problem that it caused is, how could you possibly tell whether or not the proposed congressional district have the statistical average number of voters in the redrawn map, since the population is shifting? And I'm concerned about that, because I was looking at the Texan map, and one of the commentators pointed out that when they drew the map, they had the idea that a lot of the border Latino folks were 60% in favor of Trump, which was startling to me. However, because of this ICE process, this process that looked more like a third world country or something back in the 40s or something, it's now shifted the ideology of that group away from the Trump administration. Ergo, those reliable Republican voters are no longer reliable Republican voters, so they may have redrawn the map only to lose all those districts. And one of the studies I saw showed that after the election, even with this gerrymandered map, they're not going to gain any seats. It looks like it's going to be a wash, because the voters that they're counting on aren't there, and the population shifts so much, and the map that they drew does not necessarily reflect the statistical averages of the population. So from my standpoint, we're going to be watching this very carefully. But the idea of the Supreme Court planning a stay on it, basically by staying in action, and the way they've been doing briefing and things, if it goes into next year, then that means that the election process will start before they make a final decision, which means that the decision by the court that determined that the maps should be valid, that will go. But the decision by the Supreme Court judge that stayed the action, which means that the law can go into effect, meanwhile, while they're briefing it. So I was troubled by that because it seemed to me the best course of action should have been just to let the litigation play out, let that judgment stand based on the fact that I'll be interested to see how they determine with any reasonable degree of scientific accuracy the actual population. And that's what concerned me.
Yeah, that's really troubling, Nathaniel. And I certainly agree with you. And it really kind of stems from the whole issue of the emergency docket by the U.S. Supreme Court. I saw an article that indicated that there's been 30 emergency actions that have been appealed to the Supreme Court on this emergency docket. And what the emergency docket basically means is that it doesn't go through the normal federal process where it's the district court, the federal appeals court, and then the Supreme Court. And the importance there is that the issues get narrowly defined. And, the Supreme Court is basing it upon, facts. There's an actual decision, and we can kind of understand what their thinking is. Now, what this emergency docket is doing is that instead of going through that normal process, the administration is filing an emergency appeal directly to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court is intervening without a written opinion. And that's what Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson was concerned about, and has really been raising a lot of sand about that. Finally, I'll add that you're right, that many of our brothers and sisters that are Hispanic do have buyer's remorse. And you're right, at least in terms of, some recent polling that I've seen, some of the approval ratings for the administration in Hispanic communities is, in the 30s and low 30s, and some even 20s. But this is really a good lesson for African Americans that, there wasn't, in my view, a really, deep dive into what the administration is doing. And a lot of our Hispanic brothers and sisters weren't really listening to the commentary, because before the election, the administration was saying, hey, we're going to deport X number of people, and we're only going to deport people that have been, committed, serious crimes. Well, statistically, we're saying, well, hey, there's not that many people that have committed those serious crimes to reach this goal of deporting this number of people. They're going to have to go after people that may not have a criminal offense, and that's exactly what they've done. So it just is a warning to us that we really, as African Americans, have to, read the fine print, evaluate each candidate in terms of, what policies they're, advocating, and what impact it's going to have on us.
From a personal standpoint, particularly here in Indianapolis, very rarely have I seen immigrants commit violent crimes such as murder or manslaughter, in our city. And they've had accidents, DUIs and things like that, but I'm not seeing a lot of the violent crimes perpetrated. And so I saw some commentary talking about when ICE come in that the community is safer. I'm thinking safer for who? In other words, they just simply make up statistics that are irrelevant. Most of the folks that I've seen that are immigrants, they're out working 1, 2, sometimes 3 jobs to pay their bills, and they have a little money left over, and they're sending their excess money to relatives in Mexico and other places, or Guatemala, wherever their relatives are. And they're generally just hardworking, honest, ethical folks that pay their bills. And in our city, I saw a big influx of growing Hispanic businesses. And they do something unique, Marlon, Benita, that I would like to see more in our community. In Mexico City, for example, one of the things that they do that I just think is marvelous, they do what is called crowdfunding. So they can get 15, 20, 30 people together, say, for example, to set up a food market. And they get a loan and they make weekly payment. So if it's 20 people, they all sign a note. They're all equally responsible for the full amount of the debt, but they get the capital necessary to start a business venture. And here in our city, I was riding through like 38th Street, and there's multiple, for example, Hispanic businesses. There were no Black businesses. no Black restaurants, no repair shops. And so I thought that was really significant. They're able to pool their resources. And so the point I'm making is that these people become very important to our overall economy. They're doing a lot of the jobs, for example, that the typical American don't want to do, particularly like the jobs such as those roofing jobs. I mean, those are really hard labor job and they're very dangerous. But the point I'm making is that this indiscriminate deportation of people is tearing the fabric of our communities apart. And it looked like up in Chicago, Attorney Banks, that they've been fighting back.
Absolutely, Attorney Lee. A lot of things have been happening here in the Chicagoland area. And I wanted to just share that of the hundreds of Illinois citizens that have been detained during the ICE operations here, only 16 have been determined to fall under the category of, you know, criminals engaged um, uh, in crimes in our local communities. And despite the fact that $19 million of taxpayer monies have been used to implement these activities, and um, the federal district Illinois court had ordered the release of hundreds of immigrants detained during this so-called Operation Midway Blitz. But yet the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals this week put a pause on the release, which was to take place yesterday, and has temporarily paused that order, and has ordered that briefs be filed by Monday as a result of the administration's request for a stay, advocating that the lower court's order was an incorrect interpretation of the law. And so what this means is that hundreds of citizens that have been detained will remain in custody for the time being. I might have stated that the Seventh Circuit ordered the briefs to be filed by Monday. That is not correct. They've scheduled oral arguments for next month, actually December 2nd, to decide on the government's motion to keep the detainees in custody while the appeal proceeds.
Oh, lots
So
of
one step
litigation.
forward, two steps back. So we'll see what happens.
I know that your mayor has been very vocal in opposing the assault on Chicago. And I was concerned about the raid that they did. I'm just thinking there's got to be some lawsuit that's going to be evolving from these tactics, because you still have certain rights in America, and one of the rights is to sue people for violation of your constitutional rights. So I I noticed that today I was trying to look at the number of lawsuits that have been filed against ICE, and they don't have an updated number now on the number of claims and lawsuits, but I'm sure that the number is growing rapidly each day. You know, because ultimately, I see some things that that now people are videotaping that document the misconduct, the excessive use of force under the Civil Rights Statute. See, under our federal law, we have a Fourth Amendment against unreasonable seizure, but the other part, 1983 of the Civil Rights Code, allow people to sue government actors for violation of their civil rights. And I see on the video what appears to be some blatant violation of civil rights of citizens or non-citizens. See, in our civil justice system, even if you or from a foreign country, you still have a right to sue for damages if you suffered injuries and damages. And so a lot of people don't realize that, the law doesn't discriminate in terms of who's able to bring a lawsuit. There are certain types of lawsuit that maybe has some particular things to it, but as a general rule, non-citizens can bring lawsuits. The problem is that non-citizens can't get government benefits like Social Security, for example, and they're excluded even though they pay taxes, but they do have a right to bring lawsuits. Now, but there was one other thing that was disturbing that Council Bank had brought up. This Charlie Kirk group you're saying trying to make a move on HBCUs. What's that all about?
Yes, and I think my daughter first of all is a graduate of Howard University, and so there's always been an attempt to try to uh, get African Americans to vote, with conservatives. So there is a group, Charlie Kirk's group, called Turning Point USA, and a close ally at that group is called Blexit. And so what they've been trying to do is trying to get our youth to, be more accepting of conservative viewpoints. Now, the problem is that, it's certainly okay for, students, and I think they should have different viewpoints, but a lot of times, if you really look down at the information that Turning Point is advocating, it's not factual. For example, Charlie Kirk made reference to the fact that, hey, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was a mistake. And it's just ahistorical. And he kind of says, well, hey, we should have just said, hey, don't discriminate. But the problem is that you don't understand that it was a system in terms of, Jim Crow, where you couldn't vote, difficulty in terms of owning property, difficulty in terms of, jobs, being involved in the political process. So it just kind of skirts over that information. And what's even more problematic is you have look like states like Oklahoma, they're mandating that these Turning Point chapters have to be in all the schools. And so the problem is that it's not a matter of getting a different viewpoint, which I advocate. It's a matter of people getting misinformation. Now, what happened at Howard is that this group from Turning Point, they had a few representatives and they were there during homecoming. I think the administration handled it correctly and said, hey, don't engage, don't let this ruin your homecoming experience. But I think we're going to start seeing a lot of Turning Point chapters around the country. And again, it's important to get different viewpoints, but a lot of the things that are being said are just not accurate. They're just ahistorical.
Absolutely. As Attorney Prime stated, we're seeing these conservative groups. It's my understanding that Blexit is a department within Turning Point, and that
Yes.
it's organized by Candace Owens, and that they descended on Howard University's homecoming with their quote, educate to liberate campaign, and that they were allowed, and I agree with you, Attorney Primes, they were allowed to come on campus because, again, we have free speech, First Amendment rights in this country. And they're on a tour, I understand, of several HBCUs, and they're attempting to recruit at the HBCUs. And there was a counter movement that assembled, next to them, that stayed very close and advocated against their philosophies. And so they're actively recruiting at HBCUs. I think, to your point, Marlon, that the administration handled it very carefully and appropriately, and that they were largely ignored during their visit to Howard during its recent homecoming back in October.
Yeah, and I drill down on another comment just to let you all know, if you have children out there, it's really important to just, engage and go over what they're hearing. Here are a couple of the other things that are part of Turning Point. This famous comment that, hey, if I go to a flight and I see a black pilot, I automatically wonder if they're qualified, which again is just an ignorant, ahistorical argument. If you look at some of our brothers and sisters, that were coming up in the before affirmative action, there was no job opportunities for people of color, for women. Sandra Day O'Connor was tops in her class at Stanford, couldn't find a job. And so the whole thing that the airline industry was doing was saying, hey, look at our clientele, look at the people that are flying planes. Hey, let's cast a wide net and try to find people that are representative of the community that meet the standards that can also be pilots. So I think we have to understand those nuances and make sure that we're not ingesting misinformation. And then finally, if you really look at Charlie Kirk and Candace Owens, these are people that don't even have college degrees, that don't have any expertise. They write books, they espouse on a lot of different theories, and they have no background of study in that particular area. So I think that's something that's instructive as well that you should really pay attention to. Again, it's important to educate yourself, get different perspectives, but make sure it's not misinformation.
Okay, caller, you have a question or comment for us today. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning. This is Renee from New York City. A couple comments, but then also observation about what's happening, not necessarily what's happening with the DOJ, but what's happening with the MAGA movement, with MTG resigning yesterday. I think that leaves a lot of room for what's going to happen with MAGA. I also believe that that the MAGA movement is in disarray because there are going to be some holes and some gaps. I don't know who's going to take her place since she's leaving January 5th. Kemp has the decision to whether leave that seat open or have a special election. Not sure which way he's going to go. But either way, I think the MAGA movement is starting to unravel. I'm not saying they're done, but I think they're unraveling. And then a little bit of levity on that point. That whole presser with my mayor-elect, Mamdani, I was like, this is how you do it. This is how you tame an autocrat. This is how you, and of course, he's going to keep his head on a swivel and not believe and not watch out for what Trumpster might do. But the fact that he went in there and he tamed him was amazing. And that's what, and Elise Stefanik is done. I mean, she never had a chance anyway, but I think she's done now after the fascist comment by Trumpster.
Okay. And the problem, you raised something about Marjorie Taylor Greene. There are currently, I think, 220 Republican seats and 213 Democrats, and there's like 3 open seats. And so, in theory, I can understand why she leaves in January, because that would give her an extra year in terms of the pension program that they get, I guess, as House member. But what the seats in Congress, unlike the Senate, the congressional seats require voter participation, whereas the senator seat could be nominated by the governor. And the reason that's important is that we saw the Arizona congressional person, her appointment was held up, for almost 40 days or 50 days. And so there's a process. The point is that by her leaving, if they get a few more of those Republican people to die or retire, they don't have the majority. It's a very thin majority right now. But the Speaker of the House is determined by a majority of those people that are eligible to vote on that day. And so the 120th Congress may start off with a narrow Republican majority, about maybe no more than 3 or 4 seats. Right now, of course, it's 7, but I think that number is going to close because there's probably going to be some special election. And right now, feel like the Democrats got the big momentum behind them. But we will wait and see. See. Next caller, you have a question for us? Go ahead, caller.
That caller dropped off.
Oh, we dropped off. Okay. Now, the other issue, let me see, we talked about turning point, would be I don't understand what they're doing. They're rounding these people up with ICE, and I don't understand this method that they're using. It seemed like to me, Marlon, just excessive. I've not seen them identify a single person that, for example, that was wanted for murder or manslaughter or something like that, a serious crime. I just
Yeah, I
haven't
mean,
seen that.
I haven't either. And again, we just need to hold them accountable. And I think, news reporting, is certainly not up to snuff. I mean, I think, there should be legitimate questions that, hey, clearly the administration said in the lead up to the election, hey, we're going to be targeting people that have engaged in serious criminal activity. And that's not what's happening. And as Attorney Banks indicated, in Chicago and other parts of the country. And now you're seeing massive protests in Charlotte. So I think we need to hold people accountable. The other thing that's really problematic is that there are a lot of abuses. There's individuals that, in fact, are U.S. citizens that are being rounded up, and people that are here legally are being, rounded up. And I think what's really discouraging is the recent Supreme Court decision that basically says that you can use racial profiling as it relates to these ICE raids, which is really problematic in my review. And I think Justice Sotomayor was correct in going on The View and going on a number of other programs just to express her outrage about the dangerous implications of that decision.
Okay, caller, you have a question or comment for us? Go ahead, caller. Can you hear me?
Yes. I want to make a spiritual comment right quick. Trump ran out the coattails of religion, saying that he was anti-abortion, anti-marijuana use, anti-homosexual lesbianism. And the white church spread that abroad across the board and had people believing that Trump was religious and saved and all that stuff. So that's why he got the white vote, and a lot of minorities, blacks, did not vote or did not vote Democrat, which leads me to believe that if he rides off the coattails of that again, he says right now that he doesn't think he can be saved, but he may turn around and change his mind, then ride out the coattails of that again. The thing is with African Americans, we're very much into the church, and our religious beliefs let us believe that these homosexual lesbian all is wrong. But I just want people who are in the church to realize that sin is sin across the board. There is no big sin or little sin. If you lie, you're a sinner. If you cheat or if you're adulterer, you're a sinner, which he is. He's been all of those things. He's been a liar. He hates minorities, hates anybody that's not white male particularly. And I think we need to look at it in that spectrum instead of looking at just homosexual lesbianism. You can have a white picket fence with two dogs, two cats, a white man, a white woman, a white little boy, a white little girl, and you're still a sinner. And we take things and we take one thing and make it worse than the other. And I just want us to be aware of that sin is sin, and not emphasize one over another. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Well, thank you, caller. Well, we at the end of our show, next weekend, of course, is Thanksgiving weekend, and we're not going to be broadcasting over Thanksgiving weekend, although I'll be thinking about everybody, but I plan on make sure that we give to help people who are less fortunate, which I've been doing. I noticed from a personal standpoint it appeared to me to be a larger number of people that need food assistance than I've seen in prior years. I was able to see long lines for people seeking handout food. But I went by the trustee office because there's a lot of people call our firm because we used to do the big giveaway and stuff. And I discovered that locally, if you call 211, if you know people that need food assistance, they can call 211 and they can route them to a place whereby they can get food. So I thought I need to pass that on. 211, I was unfamiliar with that, Marlon, that we had that channel. I knew 911, but I didn't realize that they called 211. They're able to get assistance, particularly with food and housing and things like that also locally.
Yeah, that's great advice. We want to make sure that everyone has a healthy Thanksgiving and is able to get the food that they need if they have food insecurity.
Attorney Bank, do they have the same system in Chicago?
Absolutely, we do. And so many businesses and organizations have stepped up and volunteered to ensure that our communities have food and clothing and just volunteering to meet the needs of so many in our communities who, as you know, as a result of the shutdown, SNAP benefits were delayed. I don't know that they've been 100% yet reinstated, but those of us that are blessed should do everything that we can to ensure that our sisters and brothers have what they need to survive these challenging times that we're finding ourselves in.
Well, thank you everyone for joining our show again. And like I said before, drive safely. Please be safe on holiday. But if you do have an accident, don't forget to call us. Take care, everybody, and I'll talk to you in 2 weeks.